Tales of an Unlikely Brotherhood by mentallypapaya, Chapter 6, +1. Okay, so maybe we're stupid. Izuku did, indeed, tell Katsuki. He told him the next morning while Katsuki was eating his breakfast with half of the class in the room, because apparently Izuku was a very cruel person. Katsuki was taking a sip of his tea when Izuku told him about the romantic partner line that Ida had given him, and the blonde snorted into his mug so hard that the liquid splashed up and stained his uniform. He slammed his mug down before he could spill any more, uncaring of the mess as his hand came up to cover his mouth, abrupt laughter coming out as a loud cackle, and Izuku collapsed into another fit of giggles next to him. The rest of them watched the two with flat gazes, both Uraraka and Ida with light pink dusting their cheeks, while Izuku and Katsuki seemed to collapse in on each other. Izuku was holding onto Katsuki's arm with his whole strength just to stay upright, while Katsuki flailed, whacking Izuku repeatedly, while the two's laughter transformed into silent wheezes that would reignite the other any time one of them seemed to finally get a hold of themselves. "I can't believe this is the first time we've ever seen Bakugou laugh this hard," Ashido said, lips thinned. "And we can't even enjoy it because he's laughing at us." "Speak for yourself." Kirishima took a sip of his own drink. Kaminari nodded along next to him. "He's laughing at you guys." "Yeah, you..." Katsuki attempted to get out. "How long?" He cut himself off with another wheeze, turning to bury his head into Izuku's shoulder as he cried, which really just served to make the class even more confused about the nature of their relationship. "They've been conspiring about it since that safety assembly." Kaminari threw them under the bus mercilessly. Uraraka became more red. "Well, it didn't make sense," she exclaimed wildly, throwing her hands around as she tried to defend herself. "You just suddenly start acting all affectionate and weird, and we couldn't figure out why." "What do you mean, suddenly? Me and Kacchan have always been the same since we were 2 years old. There's no suddenly." Izuku giggled, a wide grin on his face as he leant his elbow on Katsuki's shoulder. "If you two are friends, then why does Bakugou bully you so much, Kero?" Asui inquired, curiously, only for Katsuki to snort. "This nerd is not my friend," he declared confidently, dislodging Izuku from him and getting up from his chair. "He's fucking annoying and being around him tires me out." Uraraka made a dramatic, confused gesture, glaring at the blonde with a frustrated expression as he left the room. They all turned to Izuku for clarification. He shrugged, a wide smile on his face. It did not clear things up. The issue was that now that they'd had a very clear confirmation that the two were not dating, the class was still no closer to figuring out what the fuck was actually going on between Izuku and Katsuki. They weren't together, but they acted like more than friends, and yet Katsuki continuously stated that he didn't even like Izuku, and they weren't even close to friends, something that Izuku also never denied. So, the class was left to watch, in slight despair, as Katsuki and Izuku continued on with their lives as if nothing had happened. It continued like that for a week or two, and now they had been attuned to the knowledge that Izuku and Katsuki were somewhat of an unexplainable enigma. The class had started paying attention to way more of the pair's interactions, noticing things. Like the time Todoroki started passing around the strawberry muffins that his sister had sent him, only for Katsuki to smack Izuku's hand away the second he'd reached for one. "Nope, none for you," he decided, even as Izuku whined and Todoroki gave them an odd look. "They were sent for the whole class. Midoriya can have one if he wants," Todoroki said, gesturing the tin towards Izuku once more, and the green-headed boy smiled at him before quickly reaching in and grabbing one, ducking away with the secured treat as Katsuki tried to snatch it off him. "No! I said no! Why the fuck would you give him one?" Katsuki glared at Todoroki before turning to threaten Izuku. "Deku, give me the fucking muffin back." "But I love strawberry muffins, Kacchan," Izuku whined pathetically, as the rest of those present ping-ponged their heads between the two. "Just let me have one?" "No, you're not banging down my door in the middle of the night again, crying because you just threw up again. Not happening." Izuku pouted, and Katsuki only glared harder, taking a step towards the other as a silent warning. Izuku turned his head slightly, a daring look entering his eyes. Katsuki held up a threatening finger, slowly taking another step. Izuku put the muffin in his mouth. Katsuki pounced. The others watched, slightly amazed, as Katsuki maneuvered himself so he was holding Deku to his chest, slapping the muffin out of his hand and onto the floor, before putting a finger inside each side of Izuku's mouth, holding them there and dragging the desperately fighting boy over to the kitchen sink, like one would their dog if it was trying to eat something it shouldn't. Izuku struggled in the blonde's arms, trying to get his head away and failing miserably to remove himself from Katsuki's hold. Katsuki, with an impressively impassive face, shoved Izuku's writhing body over until his head was above the sink, using the fingers intruding on the poor boy's mouth to stop him from swallowing that bite of muffin still there. Katsuki then proceeded to scrape the muffin out of his mouth, letting the gross wet clumps of food drop sadly down the sink, while Izuku continued to choke in protest. Finally, when it was all out, Izuku accepted defeat, going limp and remaining compliant in Katsuki's hold. Katsuki sighed, looking slightly disgusted as he used his pinky to turn the tap on, rinsing the rest of his hand under the water before taking the detachable nozzle away and holding it up to Izuku's head height. "Drink," he demanded. Looking disappointed in himself, Izuku leaned forward just enough to take a mouthful of water, holding it there as Katsuki put the nozzle back. "Swish," Katsuki ordered. After a second, Izuku's cheeks started moving up and down, and he slowly did what he was told. Spit. Miserably, Izuku opened his mouth, letting the liquid fall into the sink and down the drain. Katsuki clapped him on the shoulder exactly once before shoving him to the side, turning the tap on to clean the sink and scrub his hands more thoroughly. Izuku finally made eye contact with the rest of the room, slumping in on himself when Ida raised an eyebrow at him. Sadly, eyes on the floor and scuffing his feet, Izuku revealed, "I'm allergic to strawberries." It wasn't just that Katsuki seemed to have more authority over Izuku, but Izuku himself was now noticed to have moments of uncharacteristic behavior regarding Katsuki. "Is that spicy?" Izuku asked, walking up to where Kirishima, Kaminari, Ashido, and Sero were eating lunch with the aggressive blonde. He pointed to the onigiri in Katsuki's bento, and the other boy tensed up, stilling his arms protectively and hunching over his food slightly. "No," he said, not in answer, but in warning. Izuku only grinned wider, leaning over the table slightly to reach for some of the food. "Yes!" Izuku said triumphantly, completely ignoring the murderous glare Katsuki was sending him, and ducking through the barrier of limbs to pluck one of the rice balls from the box. Based on past actions, the others expected that any second now there would be a thudding sound, an Izuku-style like scream of pain, a splatter of blood, and at least 3 students from other tables that weren't used to this freaking out and screaming for Recovery Girl. Instead, Katsuki only groaned through his teeth, slumping and continuing to eat the rest of his food with tenacity. Izuku stayed by their table, which Kirishima considered to be pushing his luck, and chewed the rest of his onigiri, while Katsuki refused to look at him. It was like a weird staring contest, or a battle of wills. Would Izuku leave, or would Katsuki finally give him attention? After about 2 minutes of awkward silence, Kirishima decided he couldn't handle it anymore, and broke the contest. "You, need anything else, Mido?" he asked, hesitantly. Katsuki jumped on this, gesturing towards the redhead. "You see, Shitty wants you to leave, so piss off." "Oh, that's not what—" Kirishima tried to clear up, but both of the Aizawa-dubbed problem children waved him off, ignoring him. "I need your pencil case. I want to use those cool gel pens you have," Izuku said, and Katsuki narrowed his eyes incredulously. "Get your own fucking pens." "No, yours are better." Izuku stomped his foot down petulantly. "Can't you just be happy that I asked this time? Mom said sharing is caring. And guess what? I don't care." "Kacchan!" Izuku whined before crossing his arms. "Look, I already took them from your room this morning. I was just being nice by letting you know." Katsuki sputtered. "What the fuck?" But Izuku just twirled on his feet, skipping back to his friend's table. Katsuki glared after him, but the others were looking at him hesitantly, as they were waiting for him to blow. But to their surprise, again, he just shook his head slightly, crossing his arms. Well, now I'm definitely not returning the headphones he thinks he lost. Kirishima looked at the others, baffled. If any of us did that, Kaminari said quietly, ducking to mumble into Kirishima's ear, we'd have to miss class because we'd be in critical condition at the hospital. Kirishima nodded in agreement, Ashido staring at Katsuki skeptically while Sero snickered into his food. Midoriya. Aizawa interrupted the classes Saturday morning, getting the green-headed boy's attention from where he had been playing a video game with Todoroki and Asui. You have a visitor. Oh, hey, Mom! Izuku perked up as Inko Midoriya entered the common rooms, a warm smile on her face as she waved at them. Aizawa left them to it as Izuku jumped up from the couch to hug Inko, starting to introduce her to the rest of the class. What are you doing here? Izuku asked, once he'd all but ushered her onto the couch, making sure she was comfortable. She laughed slightly at his enthusiasm. I wanted to drop off those clothes you mentioned forgetting, Inko answered, patting the bag she'd brought with her, slung over her shoulder. And I hadn't heard from you in a while, so I thought it'd be nice to say hi. See how you were getting along with all your fancy heroics training. For shame, Midoriya, Uraraka teased, leaning her arms onto the back of the couch, grinning. You don't call your poor mother? Inko laughed as Izuku sputtered, defending himself. I do. I've just been really busy, I swear. It's all right, Inko soothed, eyes full of mirth. I bugged Katsuki for enough updates on you, so I wasn't left in the dark or anything. Izuku rolled his eyes, as if this was a completely normal thing to say, while the others exchanged slightly confused glances. You talked to Bakugou a lot? Kaminari was the first one that bit the bullet and asked, and before Inko could respond, the man of honor entered the room, heading to the kitchen for breakfast before taking notice of the gathering in the living room and catching sight of their guest. Oh shit, he said casually, surprise flicking over his face before a fond warmth that they'd never seen on Katsuki's face before made an appearance, and he wandered over to them all. Hi, Auntie. Inko gave him a massive smile, standing up so she could give him a quick hug over the back of the couch, which he allowed and even seemed to initiate, before sitting back down. Just here to see my boys and drop some stuff off. I've not been here long. Auntie? Kirishima mouthed to the rest of the group, a confused expression on his face. Katsuki nodded, before nodding his head over to Izuku. And I'm guessing this dipshit forgot to offer you a drink. Izuku's face dropped in realization, and Inko covered her mouth to muffle her giggles, reaching out to pat him on the shoulder to curb his panic at the possibility of having been unintentionally rude to his own mother. I'll make tea, Katsuki snorted, before going over to the kitchen. Thank you, Katsuki dear. Izuku, while he does that, why don't you show me around your room so you can take these off my hands? Inko patted the bag slung over her shoulder, and Izuku nodded quickly, jumping up to lead the way. Okay, my dorm doesn't look much different than my bedroom at home, actually. I even managed to find some of the same posters really cheap online, so I didn't have to move any over, and... He started rambling as they disappeared down the hall, leaving most of the class to settle slowly back into enjoying their Saturday morning. When Inko and Izuku emerged back into the common areas, the room had mostly been dispersed as people went about their day, the novelty of having met one of their classmates' parent for the first time having worn off. Uraraka was scrolling through her phone while Asui and Sero looked over her shoulder. Most of the others continued to play their video games on the TV, and Katsuki sat on the kitchen counter, looking at his own phone while making his way through a large bowl of cereal. Izuku led Inko into the kitchen, telling her about the training exercises they had been doing lately, and explaining how cool learning heroics from actual pro heroes was, while Inko listened to him with an amused smile on her face. Well used to her son's energetic ways, and clearly proud of how far he'd managed to come in regards to living his dream. She picked up the mug of steaming hot tea that Katsuki had left for her, nodding her head over to him in thanks, so as not to interrupt Izuku's rant. It still really hasn't sunk in, you know? I mean, all these heroes that I grew up begging to see at conventions and buying merch for, and now I see them in my math class explaining how to factorize and stuff. And it's so cool having Eraserhead as a homeroom teacher. The way he juggles his capture weapon and his quirk is amazing. He's really a good person to learn from. 15 years obsessing over not having a quirk, Katsuki said idly, not looking up from his phone. You finally get one, and immediately start learning from a guy whose whole thing is eradicating them. Izuku cut off his rant to send Katsuki a dry glare, unamused, and Inko pressed her lips together to stop herself from laughing. "Don't be mean, Katsuki," she said idly, though her humor could be sensed within her tone. Katsuki shrugged, unaffected. "Oh, Mido," Asui piped up from their little trio. "Before we forget, about conventions. They're about to release the tickets for the upcoming National Pro Hero Convention, and a bunch of us are gonna go. Do you want to come with?" "Yeah, of course," Izuku exclaimed, head bouncing up and down rapidly as his eyes sparkled. "Only thing is that Aizawa-sensei overheard us talking about it earlier." Uraraka looked up at them, frowning slightly. He said that Nezu had asked him to make an announcement later on this week because you know how many of us are probably going to want to go. Apparently, because of how public the convention is and how it's usually a target for villain attacks, that due to Class 1A's habit of getting mixed into that kind of stuff, Aizawa-sensei's got to ask for parental permission to make sure we can go. "Aizawa-sensei also has to come with us," Sarah added, smirking slightly. "He didn't seem that excited about it." "Oh, that's fine." Izuku turned to Inko. "I can go, right?" Inko hesitated. His expression dropped slightly. "Mom, I always go to the pro convention," he pleaded, when Inko's face didn't change. "I know, sweetie, but this was before all this stuff about being targeted by leagues and villains and having to fight for your life on a regular basis. And those conventions have always been a bit risky anyway. I'm just not sure if I'm comfortable with you going if it's going to be magnified this time around." She gave Izuku an apologetic look, and he blanched desperately. "There's literally going to be a ton of pro heroes there, and Aizawa-sensei's going to be going just to keep us safe. We'll be fine," he tried to convince, clapping his hands in front of his face. "I'm not sure, Izuku," Inko said, still hesitating. "If it helps," Uraraka said weakly, "all of our parents are okay with it. Aizawa-sensei's really capable, so there won't be much danger, Kero." Asui backed up, and Izuku nodded repeatedly. Inko looked at the desperation and hope on their faces, sighing deeply while thinking. Finally, she breathed out, "All right, if you take Katsuki with you, to keep an eye on you, then I'm all right with you going." The others paused, looking at each other in confusion. Izuku spun around, looking to Katsuki hopefully, and not seeming at all as if this was an uncommon occurrence for him. Katsuki froze, spoonful of cereal to his mouth, phone in one hand, looking up at them through his hair from where he was perched on the side of the kitchen counter. "There's no fucking way I'm gonna go to that thing," he declared, speaking around the spoon. Izuku slumped, turning back to Inko. "Oh, come on, Mom," he pleaded. Inko shook her head firmly. "I'm sorry, Izuku, but unless he agrees to go with you, then I don't want you to go." Switching tactics quickly, Izuku turned and rushed at Katsuki's side, bending his knees slightly to shake his clasped hands at him instead. Kacchan, please!" "Nope." "I'll do your laundry for a month. I'll... "No." "Please, I'm begging you. I'll buy whatever merch you want while we're there. I'll pay for your food." "Nuh-uh." "I'll do anything." Katsuki wasn't even looking away from his phone. "I have no interest in going to another hero convention that's going to be exactly like all the others you dragged me to in the past. Not happening." "Please?" Todoroki wandered into the kitchen, watching the interaction as he placed his dirty plate into the sink. "I remember begging like that back when I was a kid, and I was told I had to take Fumi with me if I wanted to go to an amusement park once," he hummed, leaning against the wall casually. The others squinted, things suddenly clicking into place for them. With your sibling," Uraraka repeated, as if she were tasting the word for the first time. "Huh?" Asui said, eloquently. There was silence in the room, apart from the quiet background noise of Izuku still attempting to convince Katsuki to come with them to the convention. "You know, come to think of it," Uraraka started, Asui nodding as they both spoke at once. "Brothers does fit them, yeah." They delved back into silence. "Jesus Christ, can you just give it a rest?" Katsuki groaned, Izuku pressing a palm to his knee and looking up into his eyes eagerly. Please, 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 please. I'll pay for everything, and I'll give you back your pins, and I'll never ask for anything from you ever again. Well, that's a fucking lie, Katsuki interrupted, but Izuku just brushed past him, carrying on. Come on, Kacchan, you know how much I love these. Mom will only let me go if you come with me. Please, just come. You won't even have to take part in anything. I'll be with the others, so all you have to do is follow us around, and you can just ignore us the whole time. Katsuki let out a loud, irritated, tired sigh, head tilting until he could look Izuku in the eye. If I say yes, will you just shut the fuck up and leave me in peace? Izuku started to bounce up and down on the spot, nodding fervently as he waited in anticipation. Katsuki rolled his eyes. For fuck's sake, you're paying, right? Izuku seemed to explode in happiness, rushing forward to overload the blonde with gratitude and thank yous before returning and hurrying over to Inko, who had been watching the entire display with thinly veiled fond exasperation. So I can go, right? You'll give Aizawa-sensei permission for me? Inko chuckled, making eye contact with Katsuki, who gave her an acquiescing nod before she smiled. Yes, I'll give you permission. Izuku whooped, reaching over to give Uraraka a high five. She returned it, slightly dazed. This is only because I'm her favorite child. Katsuki smirked, jumping off the counter smoothly. Izuku pouted dramatically, and Inko laughed. Now, boys, you know I love both my sons equally. Be nice to each other, okay? And Izuku, be careful during those heroics classes. You know Katsuki will tell me if you get hurt too much, all right? Kacchan gets hurt too. You just don't baby him as much as you baby me, because he's a few months older. It's ridiculous, Izuku whined, mumbling more quietly under his breath. Snitch. I think it's more because I don't cry at Christmas advertisements on TV, Katsuki responded, walking over to stand next to him and elbow him in the side. Keep it up and you can say goodbye convention, he said out of the side of his mouth, even as he gave Inko a bright smile. Izuku jolted to attention. You win, he assured, before stepping forward to say goodbye to his mother, beginning to lead her out of the dorms. Katsuki went with him, leaving the rest of them alone to stew in their realizations. Uraraka turned to Asui. We might be really fucking stupid. Yeah, we might be. I think it's more because I don't cry at Christmas Aw, of course he does.